over the last couple of days, I've been covering players and how their role is going to change and what they need to do over the last part of the season. I avoided a few players just because I don't think they're going to actually be a consistent part of the rotation, but just for completion, I'm going to go ahead and talk about those players today. We're going to talk about Dalen Terry, Kevin Huerter, Trey Jones, and Julian Phillips and what they need to do over the second half of the season because their future also does hang in the balance. We're also going to preview tonight's game against the Pistons and dive a little bit into the mailbag. All that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today. I want to talk about players that got a lot on the line, basically their NBA careers between this season and for some, and some have the opportunity next season because they do have the contracts there. But really important, especially with the Bulls, hopefully adding more young talent in the draft this upcoming year. But first, before we get into that, I do want to talk a little bit about Josh Giddey. Now, I know I talked about Josh Giddey in yesterday's episode with yesterday's group, and he belongs more in that group, right? But I just want to be clear here. This offseason is hugely important for the future of Josh Giddey. Not to say that he's going to be out of the NBA. That's not any chance of happening. If any Bulls fan looks at you with a serious face and thinks that Josh Giddey has a chance of being out the NBA by the end of the season, they just have Josh Giddey, blind Josh Giddey hate. It's just that's not what is on the line for Josh Giddey. But I do think his prioritization is what's on the line. Yes, he's only 22 years old, right? But that moniker of only being 22 years old only lasts for so long. And while some Josh Giddey stands try to use things like per 36 and things like that, there's no doubt about it that Josh Giddey has not been very efficient this year. Now, some of that is, again, like I always say, not on him. It's on the role, right? And how some of the things that he does well, just by the nature of having so many ball handlers on this team, you're taking the ball out of his hand, you're forcing him off ball a little bit more than what he probably needs to be. But let's not act like Josh Giddey's putting up terrible numbers. 12 points per game, 7 rebounds, 6.5 assists on 44% shooting from the field, 33% shooting from three. Technically, it's his best three-point shooting season only because of 0.2 better than what it was the season before. But even with that said, he's taking an additional 3 as well per game than what he took last year. So those things are there, right? The last time Josh Giddey took 3.9 three-pointers per game, he shot it at 26%. This season, he's shooting 3.9 threes per game, and he's shooting at almost 34%. So there is an increase there for Josh Giddey. The 12 points per game are right in line with the majority of what he's had for his career. He averages 13.6 for his career. Had that one season, his second season in OKC, where he averaged 16.6 points. But other than that, he's been around the 12 points, right? Josh Giddey is hitting around his career numbers. He averages for his career 13.6 points, 7.3 rebounds, 5.9 assists. He's right along that. And this year, he's also averaging a steal per game, the most in his career as well, and a half a block per game, which is right along with what his career averages are. Josh Giddey is who he is. He's a flawed player, yes, make no mistake about it. And one of the biggest questions that the Bulls have to ask themselves in regards to Josh Giddey is, how does he fit in? Right? What does Josh Giddey bring going forward? And how do they plan on using him? Is he going to be the complete distributor of your offense? Are you going to use this still dual threat backcourt where Coby has to have the ball in his hands a little bit more? Do you feel like there's more room for growth than what we saw at times this season as well, right? Those are all things. Now that Zach LaVine is off, out of here, he's going to have more shooting opportunities for sure. And we're going to see how he does a little bit more. You're taking away a ball-dominant player to now kind of free up a little bit more of the shots. That's why kind of in the game since Zach LaVine left, you're seeing kind of that shot distribution be even across all the teams, right? I mean, all the players. So you look at it, for example, in January, Josh Giddey was averaging 9.2 shots per game. Right now, he did allow or average 11.6 in December, but so far in the month of February, through the 4-game series, averaging 14 shots per game. What he does with those extra shots, that's going to be important, right? That's going to be really important. For the month of February so far, Josh Giddey's averaging 18.5 points per game, 6.3 rebounds, basically 5 assists, 1.5 steals per game as well, right under a block per game, so almost a block per game, but he is turning the ball over 2.5 times per game. When he get that assist to turnover ratio a little bit better. But I think, Josh Giddey's future, I still lean towards this. He's going to be re-signed. And the Bulls are going to take some more opportunity. They basically put themselves in the same situation as Patrick Williams. He's so young. He's had 1 year on your team, and I don't see them letting that go. So for anybody who's saying, oh, they're just going to let Josh Giddey walk, we've been here before. Every time that somebody said, oh, they're just going to let a young player walk, they've never done so. People said they should have done it with P. Will. They didn't do it. They've already taken in the last year of Dalen Terry's contract. They're not going to do it there. They're not just going to let a young player walk away, right? Especially not one in Josh Giddey. I know people like to say he's a triple-double walking. He's really not anymore. But, that's part of the makeup of the team. You don't have to be a walking triple-double to be able to be a big part of a team and part of an offense. Josh Giddey just has to show how he's going to be that for this team, and we'll see, right? We'll see. But, the conversation, I always say this, Bulls fans, they go too far left sometimes, right? To have a conversation like Josh Giddey's some horrible basketball player, he's not. He's not Javon Carter. We got a horrible basketball player on the bench there. He's not that, right? And some of the players that, and again, I'm talking about a small group of Bulls fans, not everybody. Some of the players that Bulls fans cap for, there's still Bulls fans we should have gave Chris Duarte a chance. Josh Giddey's been better than Chris Duarte every season of their careers. What are we doing here, right? Sometimes as a fandom, they get so much blind hate for, and I get it, he was traded for Alex Caruso, but at some point, you got to move on from that. Josh Giddey is a productive player. He's flawed. He's majorly flawed. And I wish that he wouldn't be so much of a confidence player and we'd see much more consistency from him, but it is what it is, right? And so Josh Giddey, as far as what that extension looks like, and then also what the suitors could look like that could help facilitate a deal, that's another thing that the Bulls have to look for when it comes to Josh Giddey. And we'll see. We'll see. But let's move on. The players that I actually think have the most on the line as far as are they just going to even be part of the rotation? One, Dalen Terry. Dalen Terry is a player that is still the potential of Dalen Terry far outweighs the reality of anything that we've gotten from Dalen Terry. And that's not to slight Dalen. It's not to talk shit about Dalen. That's just to be real. Dalen has shown some flashes, and I do not want to take that away and act like Dalen Terry's not a player that we haven't seen some things from. Another confidence player. We've seen games where Dalen Terry is playing well, and he starts taking players off the dribble and going to the line like goddamn, I don't even know who to compare it to, right? We've seen those games and those flashes have been like, damn, Dalen. Damn, this is who Dalen could be, right? And not to say that Dalen's ever going to be a consistent scorer. I don't see that with him, but he is a guy that can affect a lot of different areas of the game. But then you got to get into the reality. He's a player averaging 4 points per game, 3.9, 1.5 rebounds, 1.2 assists on 45% shooting. That's who Dalen Terry is. 35% shooting from three, which is the best of his career, but he's only taken 1.5 threes per game, right? So Dalen is a guy that, again, he doesn't turn the ball over, averages less than a half of a turnover per game for his career, but then again, he's not having the ball in his hands a lot. He's averaged 12.5 minutes per game, the most of his NBA career this season, right? So that's what it is there. But then you start seeing that he's falling out of the rotation a little bit. Averaging 6 minutes per game so far in February. He was dealing with the injury. In January, he averaged 11.3 points per game, but in December, he was averaging 15. So it's been the scaling minutes for him as well. But Dalen is a guy that we know that the energy's there. We know that there's some athleticism there. We know that there's a defender in there as well, right? But at some point, players that are going to bring more can pass you up. And that's the thing that it comes out to. Yes, Dalen has great potential as a rebounder, as a passer in transition, as a defender. He has that, right? But he hasn't really lived up to those. He's never averaged more than 2 rebounds, never averaged more than 1.5 assists. But then again, he hasn't gotten a lot of minutes. But Dalen Terry, especially when you have guys like Kevin Huerter that came in, who's a system player who we're going to talk about next, and if you get anybody in this draft, now that P. Will's on the bench as well, right? Modest is firmly entrenched in the minutes. It gets harder and harder for Dalen Terry. And so we'll see what happens, but Dalen Terry has a lot that he needs to prove between now and the end of the season if he wants to really be a part of this Bulls future. And many people are already writing him off. And I can't knock them for that. I can't say that they're wrong for that because Dalen Terry hasn't really shown much consistently for the Chicago Bulls team that you can really use. He just hasn't. So we'll see what happens there in the long run for Dalen. The next player is Kevin Huerter. This is one of the new incoming players for the Chicago Bulls team. Kevin Huerter is an interesting thing because, like I said, Kevin Huerter is a really good system player, right? He's a really good role player. And yes, he started before, and there were even some people that are like, "Oh, he's going to start on this team," doing the same thing that have happened with Chris Duarte. Listen, like I said before, I don't know why Bulls fans cap so much for middle tier players, but that's what Kevin Huerter has been. Now, on the flip side of that, Kevin Huerter has also shown himself to be he can be a sniper. He's not this season. The shooting things have been there. He's talked about the fact of what's happened with the shooting as far as like the change of makeup with that Atlanta team and things like that have hurt him as far as with that. Okay, cool, right? If that's the case, that's the case. But when you look at Kevin Huerter as well, like he's always shown between Atlanta and Sacramento, he's shown flashes. He averages 11.5 points per game for his career. He's a 37% shooter for his career. He's shooting 30% this year, but he's a 37% career three-point shooter. Now, he does have a season under his contract next year, right? And that's a big thing here, right? He is a guy that can do that. We know that he can shoot near 40% from three. Now, when you look at him, he's 6'7". He offers some good size combination and things like that. And you gotta wonder when it comes down to what is the future of Kevin Huerter. I do think that Kevin can find a path on this team. I think that especially when you look at Billy Donovan, he likes system players like this. He just does, right? But Kevin Huerter's going to have to shoot the ball much better. We talked about in the first half of the first game that he played, he actually didn't shoot the ball well, but he did a lot of other things well. Assists, moving the ball right? Being in the right position, understanding as a veteran how and where the ball needs to go, not getting in the way, right? That's what Kevin Huerter has a benefit from. He's a 7-year pro, right? And he's still a fairly young player, but I'll tell you this, like there's still a world in which Kevin Huerter's flipped this offseason. There's absolutely a world in which that happens. And if that happens, you got to look at it and say, like, it's not a bad thing, but his contract, he's definitely not playing up to that contract at all. He got that contract because of a year that he had, and it was earned at that point in time, right? He had 15 points per game with Sacramento that first year there, but it has not really, nothing is followed up with that for Kevin Huerter. So here's the thing. Kevin Huerter has a lot that he needs to show. And I'll say this, he does have a path where he's still going to have a role on this team next year, but it depends on where else do we improve. Because if we get another wing in the draft, that takes some wing minutes away that could potentially go to Kevin Huerter. Now, I know some people are going to say, well, maybe should he be playing over Patrick Williams? I think the Bulls are still invested in P. Will. Of course, he's not a starter anymore, but, we'll see. So he's another player. And then the player that has to show something if they want to stay here with the Bulls, even though we heard that the Bulls could look to keep him at the end of this deal, is Tre Jones. Tre Jones is an interesting player because I look at it, right? You look at he averaged in his third year 12.9 points per game, 6.6 assists as a starter with San Antonio, right? And with that, he got a $19 million 2-year contract, which is a fairly movable contract, right? And then after that, he moved to a part-time starter, and his averages dipped to 10 points per game, 6.2 assists, even though he became a more efficient player. Then it came down to this year, right? Whereas the San Antonio Spurs prioritized improving their guards. Chris Paul, you got Chris Paul coming in there, you got Stephen Castle coming in there, and that pushed him all the way down to where he was basically out of the rotation. 16.1 minutes per game, 4.4 points, 3.7 assists. Still, the turnovers are low. Tre Jones is a player that could be, if he ends up on the right team that just needs his facilitating, he could have a tremendous season, make no mistake about it, right? But the thing is that with us having, depending on what the future is with Josh Giddey, we already locked Lonzo Ball into a contract extension. The facilitators on this team are already kind of taken care of, which pushes Tre Jones to potentially being out of that rotation and maybe a player that the Bulls don't look to sign. But Tre Jones is going to have opportunities. Lonzo Ball's dealing with something. He may not play tonight, right? And already he's not playing back-to-back. So that gives at least Tre Jones the opportunity in back-to-backs where he could have some minutes. Question is what he does with those guys. So I think that's a big thing for Tre Jones as well. What is he going to show? What is he going to bring? The last player in this group that I want to talk about is Julian Phillips. This is a guy who I still think has a lot of potential. And I don't think the Bulls are going to give up on him anytime soon, but he's completely fallen out of the rotation. You can't deny that, right? Like Julian Phillips went from, at the start of the season, at times being the first player off the bench. There were times where he was the first guy off the bench this season for the Bulls. And that is now gone to, we're now looking at some games where it's like, why didn't Julian play? He started off the first 2 months of the season averaging 13.7 minutes per game. That then went up in December to 14.2 minutes per game. But then in January, something switched. He only averaged 11.6 points per game in that time. And now in February, after dealing with the injury, only 8.5 minutes he's averaging. So he's clearly falling out of the favor of Billy Donovan for some reason. But Julian Phillips is still a guy that, to me, if the Bulls were to move on from, I could see him going to a team like the Rockets, like the OKC Thunder, like the Spurs, and they find a way to get something out because there's still that 3-and-D potential. Yes, he needs to put on some weight. Yes, he needs to become more consistent, but he's 21 years old, 6'8", 198 pounds. This guy still has, to me, a lot of potential here for the Bulls. But he's going to have to show something, whether it's in practice, whether it's the little bit of opportunity that he gets between now and next year as well in training camp. Julian has to show some things because as of right now, Julian, his chance of him falling out of this rotation completely, he's looking at him dead in their eyes. So, we'll see what happens with Julian. But him and Dalen are two guys, especially as we're prioritizing youth and development, that if they're falling out now, I don't know if they ever get back in, right? So we'll see what happens there. But those are my thoughts on those guys that I haven't talked about yet. You guys can let me know how you feel on that down below. With that said, the Bulls do have a game tonight. They have a game against the Detroit Pistons, actually, and this is a team that we are familiar with. The Pistons are a team that is much better than the Chicago Bulls. They're 6th right now in the Eastern Conference. You look at their season averages, they're right in the middle. They're truly in the middle of the pack. This is why I say the Bulls aren't middle of the pack. The Pistons are 17th in net rating, 15th in offensive rating, and 12th in defensive rating, right? 18th in true shooting percentage on the season, 4th in rebounding percentage. They don't turn the ball over much at all, right? And so you look at the last 5 games for them. They have the 8th best net rating in the league. They're 3-2 over the last 5. They have the 8th best offensive rating, the 15th best defensive rating. They're shooting the ball really effectively as well. They're rebounding really well. Their assist percentage is 3rd in the NBA over the last 5 games. This is a team that's finding and hitting their stride at the right time leading into the All-Star break, right? They're 5-5 in their last 10, so you got to look at that as well. But I think overall, this is a team that they get it done on both sides of the ball. And they got Cade Cunningham, who was blossoming into a star in front of everybody's eyes. The Bulls got to be prepared tonight. And much like Billy Donovan did not have the team prepared for a full 4 quarters of basketball against the Golden State Warriors, this is another team that no matter what the lead you could have potentially in the first half, they're not going to go away. They're not going to go quietly into the night. They're going to fight. And that's where the Bulls have really failed at the most, is against teams that have a ton of fight. So the Bulls are going to have to be ready for this one, because if they're not, the Detroit Pistons are coming to punch them in the damn faces. That's what they're coming to do. So, when you look at it, of course, watching the blossoming of Buzelis, there's something special as well there going on with Buzelis, Julian Phillips. Jalen Smith and Coby White. There's something with those minutes. There's something brewing there. There hasn't been enough of it for me to say that it's this huge, great thing yet. But there's something brewing there between that lineup as well. And I want to see how Billy Donovan uses that a little bit more. Trusting Billy Donovan to use a lineup brings its own frustrations and concerns, right? But there's that part of it. So there's definitely things that the Bulls can look to do in this game to try to win it. The Bulls right now are still 10th in the Eastern Conference, right? Our lottery odds have increased. They continue to increase, which is really good. I'm not mad at that at all, right? Especially with Portland doing whatever they're doing, which is crazy. They keep winning. They're 7-3 in their last 10. But overall, in the basketball sense of it, right? And that's what I'm looking at here, is what do you do in between the lines as far as playing basketball? That's what I'm looking at here. And that's something that you just want to put out the right things. You still want to find the right rotations. Coby White's playing really well again, right? He's getting back into being the player that he's been before. And I think with Zach LaVine being gone and Coby White being able to go back to a high usage player, right? Now, keep in mind, usage doesn't always mean you're finishing everything with scoring. Usage rate also looks at how many possessions end in an assist by you. And that's where Coby White is really his best at, when he's able to be that high usage point guard that can create off his ability to drive, whether it's shots for himself or getting to the free throw line, which is another thing that Coby White is doing really good over these last few games, is getting to the free throw line. That was the thing that I wanted Coby White to do this season, right? If you go back and look at my preseason conversations when I talked about some stuff that I wanted to see every player improve on this year, it was really Coby White getting to the free throw line. Consistency also was there, but I think getting to the free throw line helps with that consistency, right? Because one thing that Coby has done, when you look at the course of his career, he's only ever averaged, the most he's ever averaged is 2 attempts at the free throw line. This season, he's up to 3.5, right? And then when you look at the last handful of games for him, he's actually averaging 6.5 free throws per game for the month of February so far. That's really good. That's really, really good. So you take that and look at, for example, the month of January, he only averaged 2.8 free throws per game. So when Coby drives and he creates, it adds to that. If he's starting to get to the free throw line more, I think that's why you're seeing in the month of February him averaging over 20 points per game, because he's also chipping in from the free throw line. And he's really efficient from the free throw line. He's 100% from the free throw line in the month of February. And that's with his free throw attempts being one of the highest of his career, right? So that's what you want to see from Coby White. Him, of course, minus Buzelis. You still want to see that facilitating from Josh Giddey. He's been locked in on both sides of the ball. He's still going to make some mistakes because he's not a great on-ball defender, but you can't deny that, like, those times where Josh Giddey's fallen asleep defensively, he's still kind of been there some. So those are becoming less and less. So really looking at that, Jalen Smith's still having a really good season now. He's back to kind of getting in that rotation and that momentum he had before his injury. You want to see that continue for him as well. So we'll see what happens and what the future holds for this Bulls team. But there are a lot of things in this game that I'm looking out for. Billy Donovan's coaching is one of them, and how this team kind of reacts and fights back, right? We didn't have a lot of fight in the last game. Do the Bulls have more fight if it comes down to a drag-out fight? We got the next 2 games at home against the same opponent. Could be pretty interesting to watch. But let me know what you guys think on all that down below. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bulls Central Pod. You send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that's thanks to you lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.